Hello, welcome to the Saroy channel. I'm so glad you've joined me this evening. I've got a lovely story for you tonight, and it's about Mothman. So let's get started. Dear Sarah, my family is from West Virginia and Mount Pleasant, and so naturally we had heard all about the Mothman. But I well and truly believed it was just a mystical legend and nothing more until I spoke to my grandmother one day. Mothman is not a legend, she assured me. He's a real live entity, although he has been linked with supernatural experiences and encounters. What makes you so sure he's real? I asked. My grandmother stoked the flames of the huge fire that was crackling away in the old stone fireplace. It was a freezing night, and the heavy winds were whistling in the background, causing the windows of my grandmother's cabin to rattle. This was the perfect night, I thought, to bring up Mothman and other ghost stories, because it was an airily cold night with a rather formidable ambience, the ideal setting for a lovely, scary story. Let's have a nice warm cup of chocolate first, said my gran, and I will tell you my story. I looked at my sister Gabriella excitedly. She's going to tell us all about Mothman, I said. Gabrielle made a pooh-pooh kind of face and said, "You know, it's just a legend, nothing more." My grandmother handed us each a large mug of piping hot chocolate filled with baby marshmallows, just the way we loved it. "That's where you're wrong, Gabriella dear. Mothman is as real as you and I," she said. "Do not go doubting him, because he could make an appearance in your life. He has this habit of showing himself to non-believers." My sister shuddered. "All right," she said. "I believe in you, Mothman, so no personal visitations, please." My grandmother sat down and straightened the bodice of her dress, and then her expression grew gravely serious. On her lap was a wooden box containing letters from her sister Alice from the year 1966. "Why was Alice sending you letters from Virginia? Were you not living here also?" I asked in surprise. "Is this not your childhood home?" "Of course it is," she said. "No, I was living in England then for a year with my father's brother, who had been taken ill, and my father sent me abroad to take care of him." "What was wrong with him?" I asked. "He had cancer in the bones, so he didn't live very long," she said. "He survived a year, after which I returned home to Virginia. He was a very nice man, and his death was a tragedy. He was 45 when he died." "Way too young," I agreed. "In those days, living to 45 was not always such a bad innings," said my grandmother. "Growing up, a lot of people died at very young ages. From influenza, it wasn't uncommon in those days, you know." "How old were you at the time?" I asked curiously. "About 24, and my sister was 2 years younger than I was." "So she was about 22 when she sent you those letters?" "That's right," my grandmother nodded, and untied one of the letters from a small pile of envelopes that was tied up in a red ribbon. "Let me read you this," she said, putting on her spectacles and settling her eyes on the written script. It read, "April the 22nd, 1966. Dear Sis, I miss you so much. It's not the same without you here. How is Uncle Fred? Is he getting any better? I do hope so. Dad feels really bad that he asked you to take care of his brother. But you've always been the great caretaker of the family since Mum died. So I know Uncle Fred is in the best of hands. He really is. I want to tell you something, Sis, and please do not get alarmed, because I know how protective you can be over me. I just can't tell anyone what I saw last night. I've never been this terrified in all of my life. It was about 10 o'clock when I retired to bed. I had made dinner for Dad and I'd fed the dog. At about 10:30, I heard this loud flapping sound coming from the garden, and Terry was barking madly. I've never heard him bark so much. He yapped and he yapped, so I got out of bed to let him out in the garden. I followed him because his little legs went tearing towards the wooded area of our garden that faces the valley on the western slope. You know the part where I mean. It was there that I saw the creature staring at me. He had huge diamond-shaped red compound eyes that were burning like red coals. He was standing on two human-like legs, but they were thick and long, and he had the most enormous wingspan, like a dragon, and spanned about 12 feet in width. I promise you, sis, I just froze to the spot, but Terry kept barking at this creature. He gave me one more look, the creature I mean, and then he just flew away on his wings into the wood. I know I never imagined this, sis. The next night I woke up to see the creature looking through at me from the bedroom window. Sis, I saw those glowing red eyes all over again, and this time he stared at with me for such a menacing look from his eyes, and it must have been at least 5 minutes, and then once again I heard his flapping wings flying away. I think Terry heard it too, because at that moment he didn't stop yapping. On night 3, sis, I was too scared to sleep. I didn't retire to bed. I sat by the fire with Terry on my lap and was woken again by Terry's loud yaps and the rustling sound of that horrible creature's wings. Once again I saw the red eyes staring at me through the window. I screamed at him, sis, at the top of my lungs, and he flew away. I said, "Please go away and never come back, never, never come back." Dad came rushing into the room and asked me why I was screaming so loudly and yelling, and what was the commotion, and what was the heavy rustling sound. So even Dad heard the creature's wings. I told Dad I was just having a bad dream. He asked me why I was sleeping on the settee in the living room. A few nights have passed and I have not seen the creature again, but sis, whatever he is, he scared the living daylights out of me. So please hurry home, because I'm afraid of this thing returning. Suppose it comes back. I dread to think. Wow, I said when my gran finished the letter. That was some story. Your sister was really freaked out by that creature. My sister was never driven by fanciful whims, said my grandmother. If she saw that creature, you better believe she saw it. When I returned from England, my sister insisted on sleeping in my room so that she was never ever alone again. I believe she was terrified for many years after the encounter. Did she ever see the creature again? I asked. No, never, said my gran, but she did hear his wings one night, and I did too. You did? I gasped. What did it sound like, Gran? The wings, I mean. If you were hitting a large textbook on your bed, it sounded a little like that, but you could tell they were wings. So now, said my gran, folding away her letter and replacing it in her wooden box, do you believe in Mothman now? We both nodded. Mothman now was a very real entity because we knew our gran would never lie to us. That's my story. I hope you found it of interest. It was a lovely story. Thank you so very much. Until next time, good night.